We got an update today on NCSoft's upcoming Destiny killer, you know, the label that gets slapped on any new looter shooter that hits the scene. Of course, they're all always wrong, much like every WoW killer that's come and gone. With but a very few rare exceptions, do any games ever get close to toppling the king of a respective genre? Anyways, I'm going on a tangent. Project LLL, beyond having one heck of a name, is an upcoming third-person sci-fi looter shooter, a genre made up of, yes, Destiny, but also games like Division, Warframe, Outriders, Borderlands, Defiance, Anthem, rest in peace. Games that combine first and or third-person shooting with loot and typically also some RPG class and progression systems. It is a cool genre. I really like it. In fact, I've enjoyed nearly every game just mentioned. So let's talk about the new kid on the block that is Project LLL. That name, dude. This was first revealed a little over a month ago. I made a video at the time going into some pretty big detail on what we knew. So here's a quick recap. They are referring to this officially as an open world MMO looter shooter. Those are the three genres that they say are the pillars of this game. It's going to have seamless exploration of the environment with no loading screens between zones, a world full of enemies, a variety of different types that you expect from looter shooter RPG style games. There will be your standard open world activities as well, different things to do and side quests. And then of course with the MMO element, there will be other players inhabiting the space as well. You can expect a variety of both PvE and PvP offerings. Besides the gunplay, shooting different types of weapons, they also have all sorts of high-tech themed abilities. So we've seen so far things like invisible cloaks, healing fields, scouting drones, grav grenades, missile launchers, aimbot ultimates, jetpacks, and even bullet deflecting bubbles. Hello, Destiny, once again. Vehicles will also play a big role, so you've got the typical land and air vehicles like jeeps and helicopters, but they've also got these Titanfall-esque mechs, which look really cool. I actually really like the takeover or mounting animation that we saw in that gameplay reveal. And it's all set in Seoul, South Korea, in an alternate dimension that blends sci-fi and fantasy. The big set piece moment from the reveal was this floating demon boss that materialized with 100 arms and did some sort of anti-gravity black hole explosion. I don't know, something just really bad, terrible stuff. One shot the player. I'd like to add as well, outside of what was some clearly very poor performance and a few stiff animations here and there, all in all, the reveal gameplay trailer was pretty impressive. The visuals looked great. It's a cool setting. I like a lot of the theming. There was tons of action, explosions. The gunplay sounded and looked pretty solid to me as well. I think it was a good reveal all around. A bit more linear than what I expected, considering they are calling this an open world MMO. At the same time though, I'm well aware that this was probably just a vertical slice that they put together specifically for the trailer. So hopefully the open world elements become more revealed as we learn and see more about the game. Okay, so that is like the high level overview. I did go into quite a bit more further detail last time we talked about this. If you're interested in more of those specifics, be sure to check out that last video we did last month. Now let's talk about the new stuff. So just last week, they released a developer update in the form of a Q&A where they responded to questions people had about the game and its reveal. They addressed some of the big concerns that people raised and also just touched on some new things about the game that we didn't already know. The first question is, tell us more about LLL. Is it like The Division or Titanfall? They got quite a few comments here, and Destiny as well. Yes, Destiny was brought up. Their response was, in the comments, a lot of people brought up big shooter titles like Division, Titanfall, and even Crysis. Those comments give us a lot to think about. Seeing people say how LLL is similar to those AAA titles or falls short really invigorated us and gave us more motivation. Took those comments to heart to make LLL an even better game. And then they further said, while this is one of many third-person shooters out there, it is unique in that it's an MMO shooter in an open world. We're working real hard to capture that essence to make something truly unique and innovative. Now, when he first said that, I'm like, bro, what are you talking about? There have been plenty of MMO looter shooters. I do believe what they're alluding to here is specifically the larger scale and player count, because while there are, yes, there's a lot of looter shooters. We went down that laundry laundry list. A majority of them aren't the traditional MMO when we talk about the number of players sharing a space at once. They fall more in line of kind of these shared world games. Specifically, you look at like The Division and Destiny, for example. These are games where you are not going to see out in the play space even 20, 30, 40, 50, let alone 100 players all in one area doing stuff. That's just not how those games are built. They are more small numbers of players phasing into and out of existence. Now, there are specific examples, social hubs, you go to the tower in Destiny. Yeah, there's a fair number of people there. I get the impression that with Project LLL, they're really leaning in to that MMO aspect. They've talked about it. They've mentioned it so many times. I am expecting large numbers of players. They seem to be emphasizing that is going to be the case. So if they really are able to deliver big, open, seamless world that has a large number of players, that would in fact be fairly unique. Not one of a kind, but a little more large scale than what is the norm, what we come to expect. The next question was a shooter and MMO and an open world game in one. People were concerned about whether or not that's possible. Their response was yes, and we're understanding at each step why this hasn't been done before. It hasn't not been done before. It's just not the norm like we just talked about. And then he went on to say, but we believe that the end result will be something truly unique and worthy of our hard work. Yeah, I mean, if they can truly, really Defiance came the closest for me to being a true MMO in the scale and player count, and also being large open spaces with seeing those large numbers of players. Defiance and Firefall were the two closest in my eyes. I'm glad they're addressing how actually difficult it is. And if you're curious why, I think really the biggest thing is that with a lot of like the, especially tab target MMOs, it's a lot easier to have a large number of players in a shared space because of latency, because of dealing with the servers, communicating back and forth between a large number of players. It is easier when you have combat systems that are much more forgiving, as tab target or soft lock, or even a lot of action games do have some latency compensation in there that make it much more forgiving when there's players of different latencies in different parts of the world all trying to play in the same space. It's just so much harder with the shooter because even the smallest amount of latency in an FPS or third-person shooter feels really bad. If you shoot and there's even like a fractions of milliseconds delay compared to what you expect, it makes the game feel bad to the point of almost being unplayable. And then the larger the number of players, you all pop into a space that's all being rendered at the same time on 20, 30, 50, 100 different players' computers at different parts of the world. The more people that gets plopped into that, more odds there are to be inconsistencies and issues with latency that make it feel bad for some, if not all of them. And so that is the biggest issue that's really hamstrung the idea of big scale MMOs. There are other games that are doing it that I should mention. I didn't bring it up last time, but you look at titles like PlanetSide 2. While I don't really consider that an MMO, it's more, I feel it's more along the lines of like a Battlefield. Large number of players all in one space. That is done in games. PlanetSide is a perfect example. But there is absolutely an extra layer when you add all of those additional elements that the what we're calling traditional MMOs that PlanetSide doesn't fill for me add, which is all of the PvE and the various dynamic engaging with the environment and doing these things and going on quests and having a bunch of NPCs and world bosses and all of that stuff. It's an extra layer that games like PlanetSide or Battlefield don't have to deal with. That I just want to address that quickly as well. Okay, moving on to the next big question, which was how much gameplay freedom will there be? And one of the comments they pulled up said, I hope we can do more than just hide and take cover. So specifically here, they're talking about world interaction and traversal. The response by the dev was, so far, the game is only designed to enable interactions at specific locations. Here, they showed a clip of players mantling up onto stuff. I love to see it. Really adds an extra element to exploration in games. Then they went on to say, our goal is to deliver a game where you can freely and seamlessly roam around the world, on foot or in vehicles for maximum freedom. To manifest such a world, we are working on various methods to allow for seamless content generation. There was also an in-development shot here of like a bunch of players on all of these shipping containers and kicking doors open and falling off of them. Looks pretty cool. As much freedom of exploration as you can give me, getting onto stuff, but then also moving through the environment with vehicles, that sounds pretty good. So the next question question asked them to further clarify the use of tactical gear and vehicles in the game. They said, "We're trying very hard to strike a balance where no single feature is a dominating factor in the gameplay. There are vehicles that grant you superior ground and aerial mobility, so stuff like jeeps and helicopters are examples. However," they said, "they come with certain limitations which call for alternatives. We're introducing a new feature called tactical gear that will help you overcome various situations. In our recent playable demo, characters were seen using area scanning, shooting single and multi-target missiles, and leveraging energy shields in their own creative ways." So it looks like what they're referring to as tactical gear is just like the different abilities that you have. What I also really liked was the use of this third arm that they have in the game, and that's what they do for weapon swapping. It's like this little robotic floating arm that will take your weapon on your back and bring it forward and swap them out. But we also saw it used for things like engaging with enemies. It was basically at one point used as a melee to pull in and then slap back one of the enemies that the players fought. Pretty cool system. But yeah, tactical gear, it's just spells, it's just the various abilities, of which we already saw quite a few in that one gameplay demo. They also touched on the Titan, saying, "We saw someone comment about the robot, which we actually call the power loader. It's a vehicle you can ride and control in the game. We're developing a system to allow for each power loader to have different basic weapons and tactical gear. This will allow you to explore and utilize various power loader settings depending on your surroundings or battle situations. They will have different Titan types, maybe ones that are really good at jumping and ones that are really good for combat and ones that are tanky. Probably I'm expecting just different classes of Titans or power loaders as they are calling them." The next question was addressing the setting, which is the Dystopian Seoul. Their response was, "Seoul is one of the key zones featured in LLL. We chose it because of how unique it is as a city that is comprised of cutting-edge tech as well as traditional elements of the past. And this is something that I really like from what they've shown, this mixing of old and new, but then also being a sci-fi fantasy game, they've got that extra layer of the otherworldly added into it," which was the next question. They talked about how this dystopian look for the environment, in order to create it, the team built two different versions of the world. The normal one, which is just intact as it is in reality, but then also the dystopian one. They applied photo scans based on what would be seen the most often for landmarks and skyscrapers and the main roads. They had a team take 3D measurements to put all of them together bit by bit. And yeah, I mean, I don't know Seoul, South Korea very well. I've seen photos of it and seen videos of whatever, but I guess it's gonna be like photorealistic, but in this alternate reality. Regardless of how close to real it is, I would say as a setting, from what we've seen in the gameplay footage, looks pretty cool. I really like that mix of old and new, this more ancient architecture and modern day cutting edge tech. So next up, we had a string of questions pertaining to the weapons in the game, how they did motion capture and trying to make it realistic and impactful, which I know it's just a trailer. From the trailer, it did seem like the gameplay, the oomph behind the gunplay specifically, looked to be one of the strong suits. Just judging the trailer, which is certainly not the whole picture, we have to play it. But yeah, let's talk about that. They said that they modeled the weapons in the game after real world ones. So in the demo, there were 6 types of firearms on display. They said that they're mindful of many of the small details, including their basic design, actuators, and the motions that are enabled when using them, the kind of the kickback and all of that, the animations behind it. And they try to replicate that as closely as possible. So there is that balance between realism, but also delivering a game that looks and feels good. And again, I will say, from what I saw, the gameplay in the trailer, the gunplay in particular, looked and sounded good. I liked the animations that were on display, sound effects. There was a nice oomph and heft to it, which is something that is fairly difficult to do well in third-person shooters in particular. For whatever reason, it seems like for the most part, first-person shooters have a better time of translating the feel of impact, of heft, and just good feeling shooting than third-person shooters do. But I've played plenty of third-person shooters that do a decent job of it, and hopefully they're able to deliver it as well. There were a couple of other questions brought up and answered specifically pertaining to making the shooting feel good and making it look realistic between the animations and the feel and all of that, but we've basically covered that in those prior questions, so we'll skip those and move straight on to performance. Yes, I'm not the only one who knows the performance was abysmal, specifically the point in which the player left the underground and emerged onto the overworld, and there was a ton of stuff going on, there was like player-friendly characters, but also all of the enemies, explosions, stealth bombers flying by, things popping off all over the place, abilities. At that point, it was super obvious to me that the frame rate completely tanked, and they are addressing this, and because there were many questions like frame drops are really bad, what happened to optimization, and the gameplay looks somewhat slow and heavy. So their response was, having lag in a shooter is disastrous for gameplay. Thank you for acknowledging that. It is. Will you address it? And having a shooter in an open world is already a huge challenge with an incredible level of difficulty. Also agree, for all of the reasons that we touched on prior, it's really hard to do well, which is why you don't see a lot of open world MMO shooters with a large number of players. So they said that it is important and inevitable mission for the tech team to work on this, from reducing the input to output time to building a distributed processing system for better reactivity in the MMO setting, as well as graphic and sound optimization and combat physics. We are addressing a myriad of elements during development. We'll be able to showcase the fruition of our tech team's efforts at launch, I think. Isn't that right? They said. They're like, hey, that's right. They're like checking with their superiors basically as to whether or not they can say that the game is going to run well. It is of the utmost importance. You know, first impressions, very, very important for a myriad of reasons for all of the gameplay systems. For me, especially in games like this, if the game doesn't play well, I'm just putting it down and moving on to one of the countless of other games that are out there that we can play that run better. So you got to make sure that the game's performance is on point as much as humanly possible. You cannot account for every system specification. You cannot account for everyone's internets if they're connected through a tin can beaming up to a satellite in the middle of Siberia or something. Like, sure, that person might have some internet issues. You can't account for everything, but you need a vast majority of players to have a good experience, not to have a lot of latency, especially in a shooter. It is hard, I understand. If you got to cut back the player count in order to make that happen, do that, or whatever you need to cut back. The physics, the graphical fidelity, the number of players. Do what you have to make sure it runs well. That is of the utmost importance. But if you can deliver all that other stuff as well, great. That's the dream. That's the dream. Let's see if you can do it. Aside from addressing performance, there were questions about the launch date, but also monetization. We saw this comment that said, looks pretty decent. I just hope there's no gacha system. There's gotta be a gacha system, dude. Okay, so their response was, LLL is still in the alpha phase, so we are more focused on making it a fun game. Dodging the question. The next response, though, said, we are working towards global PC and console release in 2024! Exclamation mark, how exciting. And we will be actively communicating about our business model and service plan, so please wait and see. Okay, so it's a totally live service game. Do I need to run through the list? We're gonna have probably a box price, maybe not, maybe it's free to play. If it is, then just add more layers to the cash shop, to the pay for convenience, to the, pay to level up faster, to the battle pass, the several tiers of battle pass. There'll be like normal battle pass that's free, and then there'll be super battle pass, and then there'll be premium battle pass. There'll be pre-order editions with early access, pre-order editions with beta access, pre-order editions to get your name in the credits for $700. Like, it's gonna be all of that, dude, because it's NCSoft. And that brings up my final point. That does it for the developer interview section of this. NCSoft, biggest red flag and likely the biggest roadblock for a lot of people to even care about this game. NCSoft are the ones making and publishing it, and I feel like a broken record at this point because I just covered this. We talked about it in Throne and Liberty video, another game that's being developed and published by NCSoft. But yes, it bears repeating, for as good as this game looks and sounds, and I do think it does, aside from the performance and some rough animations, some cool stuff they're talking about visually. It looks good. I like the idea. I like the setting. I like MMO looter shooters. A lot of boxes checked, but there's a lot of boxes in the other category of you got to expect the worst on the monetization side of things, on the how they're going to try to get money out of things. Because yes, they monetize the heck out of everything they touch, typically to the detriment of the gameplay experience. It is great for their pockets. It is bad for the players. As long as you know that going in, and you can still approach this and just try to have a fun experience with it, but be willing to put it away once all that stuff rolls in, great. And, how are you so sure, Force? They just said they're going to share more plans about their business model and service plan. We just have their track record to go off of. That's simple as that. We have their track record. That is all we can go off of. Will they surprise us? Great. I would hope so. I hope so. Maybe they'll be a pleasant surprise and they won't go in the route that they have always gone, but I am not going to expect that. Looks like my camera's cut out. I'm gonna keep on rolling. It's the end of the video anyway, so thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and yeah, I will see you guys next time. Take it easy.